How do we subsidize the energy industry? Are we on the right path? Simple questions, complex answers. What is a subsidy anyway? In a few words, subsidies refer to the money paid most of the time by governments to keep the price of a product or service low or to help a business or organizations to continue to grow. Here we show you why fossil fuel subsidies harm our fight against climate change and what are some of the key solutions to get rid of wrong economic incentives.
Fossil fuel subsidies are not producing any global public good, especially in developing worlds. Quite to the contrary, by keeping prices artificially low, they discourage energy efficiency and encouraging wasteful consumption. In fact, they are hampering innovation and technology improvements on a wider front.
Well, the IEA views fossil fuel subsidy reduction as extremely important, really because it accomplishes three different but interrelated objectives. First, it helps support energy security, because countries that decline, that reduce their consumption, their wasteful consumption of fossil fuels, do not have to import these fuels as much, and therefore their energy security is improved. Secondly, it helps reduce emissions. The IEA did some work prior to the previous COP in which we outlined a suite of 5 measures that could help the global community actually peak emissions as early as 2020, and removing fossil fuel subsidies was one of the most important measures that countries could take actually to accelerate that energy transition. And the third point is that it supports economic growth, because the bulk of fossil fuel subsidies actually go to the upper 20% of the population, and those resources, if diverted, could accomplish other tremendous economic objectives for the bulk of the population.
Enhancing transparency. That's an important part of the puzzle to solve the problem of fossil fuel subsidies. US and China, once perceived as foes in climate negotiations, are showing how a peer review process accelerates concrete solutions to climate change.
One of the big parts of the fossil fuel subsidies initiative is having countries do peer review of their own actions. And both China and the United States have been the first up. It's been voluntary, and what they've done is identified then the domestic measures which are providing subsidy support. In the case of China, it came out to about $14 billion. In the case of the United States, it's almost $9 billion. And I think this is really, really important, because what it does is it gives confidence that by the peer review process that other countries are looking at it, they can learn from that process. We have a different mechanism underway in the G20, and so you're seeing now momentum on building the transparency and also learning peer-to-peer through this review process. So this is a really, really important step that's happened since Paris.
In the peer review for the United States, we identified 16 fossil fuel subsidies, and we have made clear our intention to reform all of them. What's important about the peer review is that not only was this an exercise in terms of identifying the inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, but also to identify the steps that we propose to take in order to phase them out or to rationalize them. Since 2010, President Obama has included in his budget proposals provisions to eliminate tax subsidies for domestic domestic fossil fuel producers, which together total about $5 billion a year. And we hope that this peer review will help continue that momentum.
Despite advanced knowledge and technical work, it is impossible to discuss fossil fuel subsidies reform without acknowledging the importance of political leadership.
If you look at the leadership that Ethiopia has done in the last couple of years, they've actually now gone and went through the extent of their fossil fuel subsidy reform, about $600 million a year US, and they've actually moved now progressively to eliminate that and to put in other measures which are now increasing their renewable energy as well as community-based activities. And so if Ethiopia can do this, then our strong belief at ISD is that every single country in the world can do this. So Ethiopia has shown real leadership on looking at the issue, estimating the extent, and then making really serious reforms.
We need 3 things to make this real at the country level. We need research and data to empower political leaders and ministers that can show explicitly what are the impacts of fossil fuel subsidies and the benefits of reform. Second, we need strong communications campaigns in countries, because ultimately this only works if the politics works, and that means communicating effectively to the public, to parliaments and congresses, what are the benefits of this type of reform. And finally, we need good policy design to help countries make the transition from subsidies to streamlined or rationalized subsidies in order to protect the poorest and most vulnerable. And it has to be, those bridge policies have to be in place if this is going to work.
There are plenty of examples now of people who have moved well through this and who are succeeding as they go, and the data and the evidence is there. And so now we have to rally around the political leadership to make sure that this is something that they prioritize. The cost of inaction is so far above the cost of action on this point that we need to support and give confidence to those who have to make a different decision, because sitting still and not making that decision will just cost more down the line.